Hello, and welcome to Voices of the Industry, a podcast series bringing you leading industry voices who challenge thinking across transportation, infrastructure, and cities.
Hello and welcome to Voices of Industry, a steer podcast. I'm your host, Alia Verlos, steer lead for the new mobility market in North America. Our topic today is at the intersection of urban innovation and social justice, shared micromobility, a concept that's not just changing how we move, but who gets to move in our cities. And as cities are confronted with congestion, climate change, and uneven access to transit, bike and e-scooters sharing program have emerged as a potential solution. Yet, we must ask, are these systems reaching those who need them most? And how do we bridge the gap to ensure equitable access across diverse local communities? To explore this transformation and their implication more specifically, with me today is Laura Maloney, Membership and Engagement Director at the North American Bike Share Association, or NAPSA, Wafia Murray, Indigo Program Manager at the City of Philadelphia, and Adriel Thornton, Executive Director at Mogo Detroit Bike Share. They'll share insight on the challenges and opportunities in creating truly inclusive micromobility system. So let's roll into the conversation. And let's start with you, Laura, from NAPSA, which is an organization that has a sort of like bird's eye view on the industry. The organization has released recently a report that shows a complex picture of equity in shared micromobility. What are the most surprising trends you've seen, and what do you think is driving it?
Thanks, Alia. I just want to step back for just a second and give a little bit of a recap of who NAPSA is. We are the North American Bike Share and Scooter Share Association, and each year we produce a State of the Industry report, which reports on ridership, metrics, systems across Canada, United States, and Mexico. And equity is something we also report on, to Alia's point. And I've really got two themes that I'd like to share about from the recent report. Is for this year, we've seen an increase in the number of systems that offer some type of adaptive program. So that could be different adaptive bicycles. We are seeing a larger quantity of systems offering adaptive programs. And I think these are driven by systems recognizing the need to offer different types of vehicles to serve rider needs. And one of the things that I think is super interesting about this is the industry is exploring this together. If you look at a timeline of shared micromobility, the first bike share system in North America launched between 2008 and 2009. And then we started seeing scooters in 2017. So big picture, we're still a pretty young industry. So it's really exciting to see equity initiatives like adaptive programs that we're starting to see an increase of. The other theme that I'm not necessarily sure I would say it's surprising, but it is like worth stating, is that what we see in year after year, our reports, is that systems that incorporate equity into their programs by weaving it through all the elements, not siloing it on its own, are going to have the greatest impact. They're going to have, the greatest uptake in whatever equity programs they're doing. And I would say overall, they have the most successful metrics to share about who they're impacting and getting more people to be able to access their systems. So I'd say it's not just about doing like the one thing that's siloed over here that's checking a box. We really see that people weaving it into their programs, into the fabric is really impactful. And I think we have some really good examples here that we'll be able to talk about.
That's fantastic. You've been doing my transition. And I think this is giving us really powerful intro to deep dive now into sort of like more specific city experiences. And Adriel, I would like to start with you. You're steering Mogo in Detroit, a city with a very complex history regarding transportation access, among other things. And Mogo aims to serve a wide range of people and needs in the city. So could you go back a little bit on the sort of vision for Mogo, but also what's your most innovative equity initiative right now, and how did you develop it?
You're correct. Detroit as a whole, Metro Detroit, the city itself is over 300 square miles. And then you add Metro Detroit to it. It's a really big piece of it's a big area to cover, right? So in launching a bike share system here, the idea was obviously we have to start in some places and not be able to get to every single place at the same time. And the idea was to really focus on some of the transportation needs that the Metro Detroit area has. Our transit system here, we've got multiple bus systems, right? There's a suburban one, there's an inner city one, and while they can work together, it still is there's multiple systems. The idea of we have a light rail system that goes about 2 miles for the entire area, and so we have the idea here, and maybe it's because it was the Motor City. We used to have a very robust transportation system, a mass transit system here. And that was dismantled in the 40s and 50s as the auto industry really ramped up here. So Detroit is literally built for cars right now. So with that, though, there are some financial challenges. So we don't have a really robust transportation system, I think, across the board, right? So the idea of bike share was really a way for folks to be able to fill in those gaps. It really was a first mile, last mile solution here. But for some folks, it is the only solution. And, we actually operate in 2 counties in Metro Detroit. So we're one of the few unified transportation systems in the area. And what we launched in 2017, we baked the idea of accessibility and equity into the system. So we launched with an access pass that in large part was based on Indigo's system. And in 2018, we launched our adaptive program, which has been really, really successful here. It could be much, much better. Obviously, there's you have to buy there because these things are not cheap. But I think it's really important, and this is the most innovative solutions I think that we're getting into now, and something I'm really proud of is we're beginning just now to electrify our adaptive fleet. So we have 2 e-trikes in the system now, and it's really, really exciting. People are really excited by it, and I think that that's really important and works right into the equity piece because we know that e-bikes typically are easier for people to ride with much less effort. And so when you're talking about the adaptive community, I think that really is an important step in that direction. So we're going to continue to electrify where we can and to expand our system. So
I think these are really good examples. And maybe before going to Philly and Wafia, a question about e-bike and equity, because we know that, going back on a bike when an adult is not something that's necessarily easy. And it's even harder when you add the electric aspect of it. So how did you manage within the program that sort of balance between getting people trained to use these new tools?
I guess the thing about the adaptive program here is that the bikes, you pretty much need to be trained how to ride them, period, right? So, customer day one, it has to learn how to do something, right? So, I don't know if you've ever ridden some of the, or seen some of the adaptive vehicles, but they can be a wide range of shapes and sizes and fits, right? Some of them literally need to be fitted to you. So it takes me wow. So I still haven't mastered really riding some of them. It's a challenge, right? It's a different thing than a regular 2-wheel bike. So adding the E component to it really wasn't that much more of a challenge. I think that, it's likely that someone on a trike who's getting on one of the trikes, this probably is their first time on one, period, right? So it's not like you have to go back and relearn how to do this. I will say that I think the electrification of the fleets, if I can go to this across the board, I think is on one hand, and this is how I see it working into equity and accessibility. And again, in a city like Detroit, right, the idea that you can, that you may have to cover like really big distances, it's 12, 13 miles between our downtown and say the first suburb, Ferndale, that we have another MOGO station at, right? And there is a gap in there. Right. So if that's the way that you commute to work, though, being able or go to your doctor or any other number of things, the idea that you can do so much faster and easier, to me, is what really makes the equity piece of electric pedal assist bikes really important because it actually opens up access to me. We have seniors who are hunting those bikes down everywhere they can because they're just that much easier to ride on their body. Their knees, people may have backs, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a much easier thing for them to ride. So it actually increases, I think, that opportunity to pull people into the mix.
I think that's a really powerful example of how transportation can be a tool for social justice. Wafia, Indigo has been operating in Philly for several years now, and Adriel just mentioned the program as one of the model that has been used when they were thinking about logo. So I'm quite curious of how has your approach to equity evolved and what's driving those changes?
Great question. So I guess our initial approach to equity and what has always been our approach is very on point with what Laura mentioned. Equity, as my mentor Naja Killebrew would say, is the fabric, not the fabric softener. So it needs to be ingrained in everything that you do. And that is a stance that Indigo took to bike share from the beginning and continue to do that. I would say the way that we've evolved in our programming is really doubling down over the years on our relationships, because our relationships with our partners, especially our community partners, have really been like the strong force that keeps Indigo going, like our community ambassadors and our community champions who vouch for Indigo, right? When we were just starting out and folks didn't know who we were, and they would vouch for us and say, hey, no, these folks at Indigo, they're really good. They're really trying to provide an affordable transportation option for our residents and for our community. And having those folks vouch for us and inviting us to the meetings, it helped us to just get a foot into the door. And then, of course, it was our job to continue to build that trust, to follow through and do what we said we were going to do. We continue to sustain those relationships. So something we really try to focus on is building new relationships with new partners while also sustaining our strong relationships. Most recently, we started an Indigo Community Advisory Council. It consists of community members that have been a part of Indigo since the beginning of our system and have supported Indigo, have provided valuable feedback to us over the years. So we just kind of put that into a more structured setting. We provide funding to support all of the great feedback that they give us. And we get information from them on, what should we do about a new pass option we're looking to implement? What do we do about expansion? What are your thoughts? Like really getting that real-time feedback from trusted community members is really helpful. We've also improved some of our programming, like the Indigo Community Mini Grants program. We've added additional funding to how much community and members can apply for. Another great example is our Indigo Friends and Family Day. So this was an event that was an idea of our community ambassadors. They wanted to have like a community day where all of their community partners can come and learn not just about Indigo, but all of the great resources that each of the communities and programs are offering. They helped Indigo put that together, and we've continued to do that each year, and it gets bigger and bigger. So I would say kind of our missional equity has remained the same, but we've just really doubled down on how we can innovate our programming and continue to, build and sustain relationships with our community partners.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is definitely setting the stage for other programs to look at how you've been doing and how successful it has been for you guys in Philly. And Laura, I want to go back to you. The NAPSA report highlights various equity programs as well. Just building on what Wafia and Adriel have just shared with us, can you give us some standout other example?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. So some different examples. Basically what we do is we request information from operators, transit agencies, operating shared micromobility. And so they respond to questions that help inform our report. And so for this year, I say this year, all the metrics are from 2023. So it's our 2023 Shared Micromobility State of the Industry report for North America. Examples of equity programs that we're seeing are different discount programs. So that could be a reduced pass, reduced fare structure, alternative payment. So alternative payment could mean using some type of alternative payment. Maybe not using the app for access, maybe a partnership with a library or a physical pass that program might be using. Education and outreach programs, underscoring Wafia's point, these are huge. If people don't know that you're doing programs, if riders, potential riders don't know that they're a potential rider, you're not reaching the individuals who might need a bike share, scooter share system as their form of transportation. We also see equitable hiring processes across the board, geographic distribution policies. This could mean, being intentional about reaching certain areas of a city, community, to making sure that vehicles are available for individuals to ride. And then the other one, which I talked about already, is adaptive vehicles. And I'll note that I'm reporting on these like standalone, but what most often we see is systems that are incorporating elements of each, maybe not all, have some really robust equity programs within their systems.
Absolutely. And well, I guess what Adrielle also shared on that specific point is a testimony of that, isn't it? Adrielle, just building on what Wafia was saying and Laura was saying about training and the importance of outreach, could you deep dive a little bit more on what Mogo is doing on that front?
Sure. I think it's really, to Laura's point, I love what she said, that people have to know that they're potential customers, right? That this is for them. And, I think that's a challenge for most of our systems, right? Let me backtrack a little bit. I think that is so important. Part of the thing I think that our industry really is challenged with is getting out of our own bubble and having the resources to do so, right? So, we had a lot of attention when we first launched, right? In 2017, people were following us and stuff like that. But now across the board, we're kind of, I don't want to say stuck with them, but it's hard to grow that network, right? On these various channels. And so it's really important. And what we do is we actually, like Wafia said, we actually go out to the community. We partner with, for instance, on our Access Pass program, we partner with other equity-focused organizations, welfare rights organizations, unhoused organizations, all sorts of things. And we will go. Sometimes we will go there and have a sign-up event there where we will bring, our own computer, and then, we oftentimes may give those passes away. Here in Detroit, it's our Access Pass is $5. It's about an $85 discount off our regular price if you receive state benefits. Well, if you're receiving state benefits, there are other challenges, right? You may not have a stable place to live, but you may be at this place for now, right? But you probably you don't have a computer. You don't have these things that are barriers. We take it for granted, but it's barriers. And I think for people to actually be able to access a bike share program or a bike share system. So it's key to actually go out to the community and to these places and then do some of the work that's there, right? In person, live, right? So, I mean, that's a really important way that we really do outreach. Another way, when we go into a community before we put our stations down, we do community outreach meetings too, which is great because it helps us figure out exactly where the best place to put stations are. We all know, we may think we know where it should be and where other stakeholders think one particular station should be, but then you go to ask the community and they're like, ain't nobody riding over there, right? So that's, I think, really important. And then also it's doing, when you do your marketing, I think it's important that you make sure that you meet people where they are, not where you wish they were. So, that means, I've said this before, I think Wafia and Laura have probably heard me say this, but you got to if you're going to put posters or flyers down, go to the liquor store, go to the gas station store that's kind of hot. I know, in the city, you've got, there are multiple churches around here, community centers, but I feel like the people who go there, while they're important, they're already activated, right? They're already sort of looking for those types of things. And I think you miss a whole group of people who you're probably not reaching out to in other ways either, right? So I could go and preach the gospel of Mogo already to a lot of folks who are interested in progressive things and civic-oriented people who are the ones that tend to be going to these community meetings, et cetera, et cetera. But, if you really want some other folks, and probably some of the folks who really need it the most, meet them where they are. Barbershops. I mean, anything, you know what I'm saying? Like places that people go, again, as opposed to where you really wish they were.
I think it's an important message, this message about activation and FMS. How can we reach people who really need the service that don't necessarily think they are fitted for it? And Wafia, I'm quite interested to better understand, in the case of in Philly, how do you do that? And how is the support you're getting from the local communities is helping you doing this?
I think it starts with a conversation, right? It starts with, like, as Adrielle said, meeting people where they are. You have to go to the neighborhoods and the communities and the folks and just talk to them, have a conversation about. And it doesn't have to be just about bike share. I think that's the other thing. Like when I'm engaging with a new community, I'm just going to say, hey, and let me introduce myself. I'm Wafia with the city of Philadelphia. Tell me about you. Tell me about your community. Tell me about some of the things that you have going on. Tell me about some of the recent wins that your community organization has had. Tell me about some of the barriers that you may be experiencing. And from that conversation, sometimes you can kind of pull common themes, right, between what you hear from the community and what you can offer as a service. So for instance, if I'm talking to a community member and one of the things they're dealing with is, lack of reliable transportation, or, people are dealing with health issues, high rates of people with heart problems or diabetes or obesity or mental health, then hey, bike share can be a great way to be physically fit, physically active, a great way to help counteract some, mental health issues, a great way to get affordable transportation to healthy food, resources, farmers markets, affordable transportation back and forth to school, work, places people frequently go, right? So you want to make it, it's good to make bike share something that isn't an additional thing on people's plates, because you got to know these communities are already dealing with a lot, right? Violence, some of the things I've mentioned, gentrification, right? All of these things are real. So how can bike share be not an extra thing on a plate, but something that can help them with some of the other things that they're already working on? I would say that is often the approach that works the best and that I've seen work well in communities. And then that helps you continue to build that trust. And are you having any events that we can come to and share about this work? Are there other folks that you recommend that we talk to? So it's really like, you'll hear me talk about relationships a lot, because that's really what it is. Like, you're getting to know someone, you learn a bit about that person. Well, some people do, but I wouldn't recommend you just kind of go in hot, like, hey, this is what, I mean? You gotta, take the time to get to know each other. And once you build those relationships, you begin to build trust. And once you have that trust, it's important to maintain it. But once you have that trust and once you break through that wall, because understanding that there's a history of mistrust for just reason, historical reasons, displacement, gentrification, all of the things, right? So building those relationships, meeting people where they are, and then working to implement programs that kind of, balance what the community needs with what you can offer. Like a great example of that is the Indigo Wheels to Work program. One of the common concerns that we heard from community members, especially like during the pandemic, post-pandemic, was like access and information for the job network, right? How do you apply for jobs now when things are virtual, or, how do we get places? And so we were like, okay, let's do Wheels to Work. We provide folks free workforce development skills like resume building, networking, interview skills, how to do these things both in person and virtually. And we also provide resources and information on bike share, how to use bike share, how to plan out your route, how it can be affordable. And for folks who complete the program, they get a 6-month free membership to Indigo to help you get back and forth to jobs, to interviews, even transportation until you get that first check. Because I remember getting a job and still need to figure out how I'm going to get there until I get my first check, right? So this can be a tool to help bridge that gap.
I'd like to stay there with you, Wafia, on the sort of like conversation about financial sustainability. You've been talking about some programs and initiatives that aren't free on the user side, but they're definitely not on the city side. So Indigo operates under the umbrella of the city government, which brings its, I think, own set of challenges and opportunities. I'm quite curious to better understand how the public sector dynamics plays out in your work, and how does this impact your ability to prioritize affordability?
That is a great question. So, and this is the conversation that comes up often when people, and it's a tension of like, how do you prioritize equity and how do you prioritize financial sustainability? I think the first thing is, to be open and honest, right? Have these conversations, like the city of Philadelphia, our operators, bicycle transit systems, we communicate with each other. We talk almost every day. If there's something that we want to implement, we talk about, okay, how can we implement this and in a way that is affordable and a way that helps the system continue to be financially sustainable, and a way that we can implement this program and keep it going, right? So for instance, I would love to put things out for free, but I only want to put it out for free if we can afford to sustain it and maintain it at no cost. I would rather charge, $5, obviously something that's still affordable, but I would rather charge $5 than not charge anything if I can make sure that we can maintain this program for years to come. So like having those conversations, being very open and honest about it, I think is the first step. I would say also another step is your contracts, or whatever you have in that contract, those regulations is so important, because there are some things that people can't afford, and then there are some things that people can afford when they're forced to do it. And, you start to make things work when it's a requirement. And we've all seen examples of that. So, there's certain things, your contracts and things like that, but I do think there's also a point where you just need to be honest and understand that there is, a financial aspect to it. Bike share or share micromobility in general, a lot of people assume that share micromobility receive the same type of subsidies that like other transit agencies receive. Like we don't get the same type of funding that our, transit system gets here. And, the outside public doesn't understand that. So while they can do a lot of things or discount a lot of things, share micromobility, we can't. We're relying on fare box recovery, sponsorships, advertising, grants, all of those things. And so, we have to really balance a lot. I always say when you're managing the share micromobility program, you have to be a lawyer. You got to know how to do these contracts. You got to be an accountant. You got to know how to do budgets, all of these things, right? It's like, whew. So yeah, I say all that to say that, it really is a balance. It really needs to be an open and honest conversation. And there are certain things that you do need to be required, but make sure that once you implement them, you can do them in a sustainable way, because you don't want to offer something to the public, have people begin to rely on it, and then have to pull it back.
Yeah, I think this tension has been in the core of this industry for a long time. And Laura, I'm quite curious to hear a bit more about what NAPSA thinks about that, and if you have any other maybe example for members or best practices you've heard about.
So I'm going to underscore all the things that Wafia said, like being upfront, being honest, community engagement to like get people educated, and input on programs is so critical. Because if you let's just use an example of like a past program that people can't access, or it's just like too challenging, or it's just not working for the rider or potential rider, then that is potentially a wasted time, resource. And while some might look at it and be like, well, we did the thing, it's not enough. It's not enough to not be in, constant development of feedback and implementing that feedback to programs. I'll also say that, underscoring the tension of financial sustainability and equity. So we know that equity programs and prioritizing equity, there is a financial piece of it. So I love what Wafia said about, wanting to do something. And yeah, it would be great if everything was free. However, that's not sustainable. And so creating a balance to be able to have, successful programs that are also sustainable in the long term. And I think that what we're starting to see, what we've been seeing over the last few years, is we've seen more public funding support for shared micromobility. And, that could be local level, state level, regional, provincial. There are some things that have been changing. And what our hope is that organizations, operators, communities will take that funding and start to implement it in prioritizing equity into their systems. And like I said before, just like weaving equity into the types of things that they do. So if I were to share just like examples, best practices, it's probably reiterating some, things that Adriel and Wafia have already talked about, is communication, community engagement, and then also just like a feedback loop of what's working, what's not working. Because if it's not working, or if it's not meeting the writer's needs, or if it's creating more barriers, then it's not going to work. It's not, and I can't state that enough, because creating more barriers wouldn't help people getting on bikes or scooters within cities.
And yeah, I think you're right. I do and would love to deep dive a little bit more into the question of monitoring and what kind of metric can we use it in here, whether they're qualitative or quantitative. Before doing so, though, Adriel, you're approaching this from a different angle, being a nonprofit, or are you? I guess is my question. In a world where some of the funds are greatly focused on measurable impacts, I'm just wondering, how has it been for Mogo, and what type of narrative do you have to use to really balance expectation to affordability and equity?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. As a specifically mission-based nonprofit organization, all the same challenges are there. And I think to an extent, the expectations are maybe a little higher, strangely, because we're not connected to this. We're not a part of the city. We're not part of one of the dots, right? So I think that there are people who, I think in their head, and this is really, really what Laura and Wafia said, is there's probably an expectation, or there's a want of just, why can't I just get on this thing and go and take it? We have people who they try it in their own way by doing the chargebacks, which if folks don't know what that is, that's where, so you charge something in your credit card and then you later say that it was either a fraudulent charge or something else. So either way, your money gets refunded. People do that stuff, which is really painful, right? But I think that it's weird. I think the expectations on the metric side, our expectation, I think, is more about ridership and usefulness, right? So it really becomes a thing of people want to see, are people using this? Where? Those types of things, I think, is our highest metric. But obviously, like to Wafia's point, all this stuff takes money. And when I go in to talk to a sponsor or a potential sponsor or someone like that, I have to show them the value of ridership, right? And also speak in sort of a different language. We've got this many stations, so there's an advertising opportunity right there, or a branding opportunity, right? So on and so on. So it's different or different expectations, I think, for different people. No one has asked yet, and except for people, for my direct stakeholders, more so, is have we made $1 million yet? I mean, which we have, but they're not asking those types of questions, which is really interesting. But I think people also too may, if they look at it as a transportation, if they look at it as one of the dots, right? I think for years, those have not been money makers. In a lot of ways, if you look at it from businesses, they're kind of loss leaders in a city government. But it's a public service, so they're invested in it. I think that people think that is what's happening with us, if they think that at all, right? So yeah, we don't, publicly, we don't get asked that question a lot. So I haven't had to do a lot of different things to meet those expectations or challenges. Or, metrics, I should say. I hope I answered that question. Did I?
No, you are absolutely. As you said, it's always a mix of some quantitative elements that I think even NAPSA reports every year is also helping setting the stage at the national level. And then there's the sort of more implicit balance and conversation you also have to have on these topics. And I think these ones are just more complex and less set into or less institutionalized than we wish they were. Probably not making your daily life easy every day, but it's also what gives you, I guess, a bit of flexibility.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because, well, we have a great partnership with the city. There's a lot, not being connected allows quite a bit more flexibility, I think, in a lot of different things, right? While I would like to have that steady funding source come in via, a tax revenue or something like that, I'm also not necessarily I guess burden isn't the right word. I'm not restricted by some of the things that we know that city agencies or governments are restricted by. So it's really nice to that's the flexibility. That's the trade-off, right? I don't have that steady, I'm not being funded by the city, but I also have a lot of flexibility in where we can operate, what we can do, where we can, you know what I'm saying? Those types of things. It's a really interesting place to be.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think this is quite interesting to have both the three of you, but definitely seeing the difference between a city model and a nonprofit model for that point. Laura, do you have anything else you'd like to add on funding?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to just frame funding for those who might be tuning in about where shared micromobility funding comes from. So at some point, I think both Wafia and Adriel talked about different sponsorship opportunities. But if we step back and take a look at where does the funding come from to employ shared micromobility, like the workforce and, operations and the actual equipment, it is a mix of different things. So there's examples of sponsorship. Systems are supported by sponsorship. There are federal and state grants that are available generally for capital equipment, those usually can't be applied to operating costs. Advertising is something we see also. So, maybe some advertising opportunities, signage on, stations, user revenue. User revenue is also a funding stream. Some systems have private donors. That might be, an individual or some type of foundation that is supporting shared micromobility. City and transit funding is an example we see as well. So that's going to be a little more local funding than the federal and state. We also historically have seen some venture capital investment into shared micromobility, and then also certain types of private business funding. So just wanted to frame that because while we're getting into the conversation about the financial elements of equity in shared micromobilities, I do want to acknowledge that the funding streams for shared micromobility is diverse, and sometimes it is a balance for organizations to be sustainable based on the variety of different funding opportunities that are or potentially might not be available.
I think this is a really important recap, and it is true that we're seeing two sort of like half, but we're not seeing and overseeing all the spectrum of potential and opportunities and challenges that goes with funding in North America. So thanks for that, Laura. As we look towards the horizon of shared micromobility, well, it's very clear that there's not one path to equity and affordability. And I'm quite curious to better understand from each of you what you see as the biggest obstacle, maybe improve in this journey moving forward. And Wafia, I'd like to start with you.
I would say the biggest obstacle with equity, I would say it's two things. One, we talked about it, like the financial support to move these things along, like every other. So there's so many other programs out here that receive support from the city to help them, implement equity focused work or just keep going in general, especially things like transportation. That's a need, right? So I would say that financial support and really having shared micromobility be seen as a form of public transportation, because for some reason, many folks and larger entities do not see shared micromobility as that, but it 100% is. So I would say the financial support. And the other one is just like a real true commitment to this work. Like there's one thing to say, okay, we're going to focus on equity. There's one thing, to have it in your mission statement or to hire your diversity, equity, inclusion officer that we've seen, we saw a lot of that happen. And we saw a lot of that, and we also saw a lot of that come and go, right? So it's important to really have a true commitment to it. And I feel like once operators, cities, organizations, nonprofits really have that true commitment to equity in not just words, but in action. And, everyone is holding themselves accountable to implementing it and, not just putting something out. We talked earlier in this conversation about, it's one thing to put out a low income pass option, but if people don't know about it, especially the people that need to know about it is useless. Or if it's not accessible or functional, right? Like, did you test it out to see if people can actually sign up for this program effectively and understand the sign up process and understand what needs to be done to be a part of this program effectively? Like, that digital divide and other things are also a barrier. So moving with intentionality and moving in a meaningful way when it comes to equity is very important, in addition to the financial support to do these things effectively. Because people, not just Adriel and I, but we know so many people in this industry that have done so much on so little or with so little. And just imagine if these groups or organizations were able to get just a little bit of funding, right? Think of the impact that the industry and folks can have, right?
I think these are super powerful messages that you're giving us. And Adriel, I really wonder if you want to add to it or build it in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, again, agree with everything Mafia says, and yeah, you would be shocked by what people are able to make happen out here with nothing. I mean, literally nothing. I think having this paradigm shift where, there's pushback on equity now, and having a real concept of what that means, and that it's not a bad word, and that it's not a zero-sum game, right? Like, just because you get something doesn't mean someone else has to lose, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges or obstacle is, I think, that broad belief, right? That this is, if you don't, their equity programs or whatever, to make it equal, right? To try to get it to be equal. And if like, it's not beneficial to you, if it doesn't apply to you, I guess is what I'm saying, then that's okay. It's not, you're not going to lose anything from that. And I think that, especially when you go into neighborhoods or other locations, other cities around here, convincing folks that is beneficial. We've got an example, I guess, is we've got some communities here in Metro Detroit, and there's one that's literally sandwiched between two cities that we operate in, who, because they're a little wealthier, simply said, we don't want it, right? So totally misunderstanding what a bike share system is about, totally misunderstanding what the mission is. And I think really sort of misunderstanding that when they hear about equity and they hear about accessibility and these types of things, that they, again, I'll just say, misunderstand who that applies to and what those programs are for, right? So it's like, that's cute. You have money. You're a square mile of a really wealthy neighborhood, but you've got a bus stop right there on your main road, and so someone understands the idea of mass transit and getting people to where they have to go. This is just an add-on to that, and actually equalizes quite a few different things, right? So it's about providing more access, not taking it back, and coupling equity programs is just that we're trying to increase the access to this stuff, right? Folks who really can benefit from it. And if you like it, that's great. But there's some people who actually could really, really, really benefit from it. And so, whether you're commuting to work or trying to get to school or the doctor's office or wherever, some folks may choose to do bike share or use micromobility. Other folks don't have that choice. This is what they have. So I think really that's an obstacle, I think, to the future that we really need to address is having sort of a mental paradigm shift in how we think about these things. Yeah, I think following that will follow the fund. The funds will follow that, right?
Yeah, it's this consideration about almost like public service we always go back to, isn't it? I feel like has been a notion that the industry has been trying to really like push forward, because it also go back to, Rafia, what you were saying about the resilience. Like, we need to be able to go outside of the industry turmoil that we've seen in the past few years, and sort of really helping cities and decision makers considering shared micromobility as a long-standing options for the cities and for the communities, isn't it? Lara, I'm quite curious to hear a bit more what NAPSA is thinking on this topic.
So I'll again disagree and underscore Adriel and Wafia's point. I think when NAPSA takes a look at the challenges that our members and the industry are facing, number one is, well, there's two of them. Either they can be numbered one or two, but the first one I'll share about is the money, the funding. It does take an investment. It can be an investment of time and personnel, and also, actual money to have successful equity programs. And that is, the time is also gets to the second point of prioritizing equity. If you are not prioritizing equity, if you're not incorporating into the things that you're doing, if it's not a lens that you're looking through, then it can make these things challenging and very siloed, and it can make it feel like a checkbox. So I think that those are two huge barriers that I think the industry is facing. And one of the things that NABSA can support is, both Adriel and Wafia talked about like doing so much with so little. And my hope is that we can get people together to say, look what we did. look what we pulled from. Here's some examples of some like things that we're doing. Here's things that worked. Here's things that didn't work. And that's what NABSA does. We bring across, nonprofit, for-profit, and public agencies. We're a cross-sector organization that wants to bring everybody together to say, how can we move the needle forward for shared micromobility? And equity is one of those very important elements to us. And we're hoping that bringing people together, we can be helpful to make things happen and to help organizations, operators, and programs prioritize equity and advocate for funding that's going to help support those programs.
And I've been in conference at NABSA. I've seen these conversations between cities that are sometimes very far away from each other, just hearing what works well in one area, what works well in the others, and hopefully building from it and building from like the knowledge that everyone is sharing with each other. So I think it's a really important and core element to that. Thanks for sharing that, Lara. So as we approach the end of our conversation, I guess I want to push us to think a little big and to indulge a little bit of a policy fantasy. If you had a magic wand and you could implement one equity-focused policy across all shared micromobility systems tomorrow, what would it be? Lara, could we start with you? This is hard.
It's hard. It's also exciting because it's kind of that like, what could we do? Also, I mean, before I answer, acknowledging that shared micromobility is young. And I know like some people will be like, oh yeah, well, we've seen bike share in cities for a decade. Decade's not long in the transportation story. It's really, really not. So a magic wand. I think for me, it would be more available funding, more recognition of shared micromobility as a legitimate form of transportation and prioritizing equitable access for that. So the policy change would shared micromobility as a form of transportation and recognize across the board, across all the industry, that would be wonderful because I think it would be a domino effect of opportunities for programs across North America.
Thanks, Lara. Adriel.
If I had a magic wand, I would, I guess, give the funding piece so that people can really be in places that really need to be served. If I can snap my fingers, I mean, really, it's like I would magically have a station with X amount of bikes in every nook and cranny of the city because it's a lot of those places tend to be underserved, underpopulated, so on and so on. And so, again, these are typically the places where we find folks who actually can benefit from it the most. Who could benefit from, an equitable bike share system. That would be my magic wand, was for cities across the world or the country to be able to get this into areas that really need it.
Thanks, Adriel. And Wafia?
I would say one policy that I would implement across every system, for me, it would be adaptive. Honestly, I'm surprised that it isn't something that's just like required for shared micromobility system or just any transportation option, period. I think, adaptive bike share programs are, there's people with different abilities and disabilities, and being able to provide transportation options for them is a need, right? And if it was required and, requires to be implemented across every system, then like systems that don't have it wouldn't have to be trying to figure out how to fight to get it. And those who are currently doing it would have even more resources to make it even better. So, like, I know for me, I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone at the NABSA conference here in Philadelphia next month to talk to folks and learn more about how, awesome adaptive programs like the one in Mogo and Portland and others are implemented and, really continue the conversation about how we can make this a universal system-wide policy or thing as opposed to just like you can do it if you want, right? That just sounds so weird to me. So yeah, might as well be adaptive.
Thanks, Wafia. So it's time to wrap up, and I want to thank all of you for this very rich and nuanced discussion. Thank you for shedding the light not only on the mechanics of shared micromobility, but also the very philosophy of how we build and govern our cities. To our listeners, the next time you see a shared bike or scooters on your street, I hope you'll see it not just as a vehicle, but a small part of the larger stories of urban transformation. And I am Alia. This has been a Voices of the Industry. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and above all, keep moving.